Now comes the time to govern.
With the election in the rearview mirror, nearly all of President-elect Trump's major cabinet picks announced, we're going to sit down with Jess Peterson, who's been advocating on behalf of cattlemen in Washington, D.C. for many years, and get his perspective.
So any of you out there that say, well, President Trump better just get those and the Senate better just take heed. You know what? Don't go down that road, because that you're giving one body of government too much power.
Obviously, we'll discuss the picks for Secretary of Agriculture and Interior, but also RFK at HHS and other areas in the cabinet that impact ranching as well. Then we'll dive into ranch and livestock issues and what their futures look like with the Republican trifecta. Topics like the Farm Bill, trade, tariffs, and the animal ID mandate.
No private industry group should privatize animal ID information, and it should not be mandated by the government.
Plus, what's the future on country of origin labeling and mandatory price reporting?
The number one component that makes or breaks the cattle market.
It's a deep dive into post-election speculation on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And we welcome you here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Thanks for tuning in and joining us here on the program. I trust everybody had a great Thanksgiving holiday. And as we look into the final month here of 2024, no doubt a lot of folks have a lot of things to get done before the end of the year. And then speaking of end of year, next week, be sure to join us on the program as we're going to be talking with someone in regards to end of year stuff, specifically as some new filings that need to be done if you are an LLC. So be sure to join us on next week's program. And by the way, if you missed something on the show here today, you can go back and listen to it again by going to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, or if you have a preferred podcast provider, you can find our program there as well. Be sure to also leave us a ratings or a review. We appreciate that. Don't forget to tune in later on in the program. The Captain Tim O'Byrne, editor of Working Ranch Magazine, will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. And of course, we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. But as we turn towards our program here today, joining us on the program is Mr. Jess Peterson. He's been on with us here before. Good to have him back. He's with Western Sky Strategy and also a senior policy advisor to the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. And Jess, good to have you back here with us on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Hey, great to be back, Justin, and listeners. It's great to be here.
Well, you were the first guy I thought of when we had post-election, no matter which way it would have went, honestly. You were the first guy in my mind. I was thinking, okay, I want to visit with you just as we look at these next 4 years. And of course, we did see what happened with President Trump, just an overwhelming the vote on that. And we saw that even as it turned the U.S. House and the Senate as well. So as we look at this, just initial thoughts as we go in the second term with Trump and that 4-year gap in between there. I've heard a lot of people say that might be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think from President Trump's kind of looking at it now versus when he kind of first catch a tiger by the tail or bull by the horns, whatever analogy you want to use, he's looking at it differently. And I think every final term president looks at things differently. He's definitely moving things along when it comes to cabinet positions or who's in his cabinet. And absolutely, you saw kind of a post-COVID world under President Biden, a little frustration that was out there in the countryside. And what was unique and why we live in the greatest republic democracy in the world is that folks came out in droves and they voted across the country. And rural America, time and time again, it's rare when they're referenced as a deciding influential vote, and they were. Rural America was very influential, as you mentioned, House, Senate, and the presidency all going to the Republicans. And so now comes the time that you have their support and their interest. Now comes the time to govern. And it was a unique world for President Trump. And I don't even know, as we look at both of them, I think we all just want to maybe take lessons learned, but just that COVID time frame, just get it behind us, right? And, Trump having to try to kind of govern in that situation. Now we're in a world, we're in a little bit more conflict, right? We're staring at conflict across the globe and some other issues, and not saying that one's better than the other. I think one takes in kind of an account of a strategic alliance, how we're working within our trading partners and our allies, but something we can better understand. It's not the first time we've dealt with conflict in this country versus a global pandemic that had a lot of different funkiness that just really created causes and consternation across the country. And now it's a chance to lay out your priorities and get after it.
Mm-hmm. You and I had talked last week, and this kind of goes a little bit together with some of the other conversation. And I do want to go through some of the cabinet picks that President-elect Trump has put in place. I want to go through that just a little bit with you. But before we jump into some of that, is what do you think, besides the normal left against the right and the right against the left, whenever there's whoever's in charge, that happens? Beyond that, what do you think is going to distract the most from getting things done that are beneficial to agriculture? And part of where my question stemmed from a little bit on that was, of course, things daily are moving with cabinet picks and different things that are evolving. But I think initially, too, the concern we had was, some of the cabinet picks, and of course, at the time when we talked last, Representative Gates out of Florida was nominated as Attorney General. And there was and the concern in that was, are we going to tie up hands of getting stuff done for the next 2 years, trying to get appointments done when we're missing out on getting the work of the people done?
Absolutely. And that remains a concern. And so, but President Trump, to his credit, saw Representative Gates come in there. He saw the struggle that was coming forward. And he's always doing a little bit of that, what we call horse trade in the West, right? So, well, if you don't do Gates, then Robert Kennedy Jr., he better be able to get through, right? And of course, Kennedy Jr., it's already promised from both sides to have plenty of debate and discussion. So absolutely, you don't want to clog up these confirmation hearings. You want to get your authentic, reflective of the American people, your values, your goals set forth in these cabinet positions. But, I'm never going to say, because Trump will be Trump. We all know that. But, he's going to have some challenges if you take up all that time in confirmation hearings. You're not taking on the Farm Bill. You're not taking on these needed provisions that Americans, notably rural America, took on. So again, there's only so much time that the Congress is in session to do the work. So if that's all flooded with controversial appointments and processes and all the rest, and of course, a lot of my friends will say, well, this is Trump. He gets his appointments. No, he doesn't. They are confirmed by the United States Senate for a reason. So any of you out there that say, well, President Trump better just get those and the Senate better just take heed. You know what? Don't go down that road, because that you're giving one body of government too much power. Just like these executive orders we don't like, you elected your senator, and they should vet these nominees. The idea of a smooth nomination process, that blends into an authoritarian regime. We're not that. We do have, it's appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate for a reason. Now, as long as they don't abuse that reason, we don't want to see that. But there needs to be, in the case of Senator Chuck Grassley, he already said, look, I'm going to talk to Robert Kennedy Jr. We're going to talk about the needs for antibiotic usage in livestock. We're going to talk about the needs for chemicals in smart farming and climate. You say climate smart farming or just food production. You need those where Kennedy's not quite there. So again, yes, there needs to be reasonable time frame. The president needs to be reasonable with his cabinet picks, and let's not clog this thing up. But let's have a good vetting process. We have some tremendous United States senators that will be playing a role in this, and let's do what makes America great from day to day, no matter who's in office, and that is our incredible system. Yeah.
I appreciate your answer on that, and the fact that we need to respect the process and have respect for that. I think sometimes we just we get in this mindset of just wanting to rubber stamp this stuff, and you're right. I think that really fails the system, and that each leg of government is not doing their due diligence. So I really appreciate that answer. And Jess, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, I want to get into specifically talking through some of these appointments. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them because there's a lot of runway ahead of these folks that are appointed and what's going to get done, and we can only look a little bit back on who they are, but we're not going to spend a lot of time. And then I also want to get into talking about different things that we were going to be looking at that affect agriculture, like the interest rates, tariffs, Farm Bill, country of origin labeling, animal ID, and rules on price discovery. I want to get into that when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. But this segment today brought to you by Barn Owl. It's what we use here on our ranch operations. We can monitor stock tanks with it. Maybe it's a hay yard, a set of remote corrals, or a gate, even a set of fuel tanks that are sitting out by themselves, and you just want to know what's going on. Real-time awareness starts with Barn Owl, and it's all about peace of mind. You can build your off-grid camera systems today by going to their website at barnowl.tech. Are you tired of putting the wear and tear on your ranch pickup or your good side-by-side out checking stock tanks or reservoirs? Or maybe it's just keeping an eye on a remote ranch location. When you stop and you think about it and you start to calculate the cost of your time, fuel, and miles on your vehicles, you're going to scare yourself. But there really is a very simple and a reassuring solution, and it's called Barn Owl. Barn Owl off-grid cameras and smart alerts provide you that assurance, and there's no question it is a time and a money saver. From anywhere at any time. No Wi-Fi or power needed. Build your off-grid camera system today at barnowl.tech. Real-time awareness starts here. Always know with Barn Owl. You know, if you got somebody on your Christmas list this year that enjoys a great cup of coffee, might I suggest a sampler pack from Cowpuncher Coffee? Yeah, you can give Jim or Trish Williams a call. Check them out. Check out everything they've got online. You can go to their website at cowpunchercoffee.com. Give Jim or Trish Williams a call, or you can order online. Grab a mug and let's spur the day with Cowpuncher Coffee. Well, as we continue on here on the program today, my guest today is Mr. Jess Peterson, and we're talking as we move into looking ahead at President-elect Trump and the 4 years in with that, and anticipating what we're going to see with that, in addition to talking about just where we're at now and some of the cabinet picks. Jess, in the break here, we were talking about where we're going to go as we have this part of our discussion. And of course, as I had said, a lot of times in agriculture, we just say, okay, well, who's the Secretary of Agriculture? Who's Department of Interior? Because that really, in our minds, that's what we think about. But you pointed out very clearly that one of the things that you really watch is there's some other picks, and one of those being the Department of Treasury.
Absolutely. And it was probably the most contested seat there. Scott Bessent was named for that. He was battling there with Ludnick. I'm not saying these names correctly. Ludnick went over to Commerce, and of course, Scott Bessent got this. And Scott, again, a lot of these folks in the Trump administration, self-made man. Yes, he's a hedge fund executive. I don't particularly embrace the world of hedge funds personally, but they know how markets work. They've made a lot more money than I ever have or ever will, but they understand fiscal policy. They understand inflation. And this is where, the previous administration missed it a little bit. You can't keep flooding the economy with government cash and government spending. And so someone like Scott Bessent's going to come in there. We've seen these interest rates tick down a little bit. He's going to, obviously the Fed operates in an independent world, but they have influence and they have those conversations. Where is the role of tariffs? Where is the role of tax cuts? Where is the role, if there is instances of government spending or government investment? This individual, Scott Bessent's going to play a really key role. And I think about that. Of all the things that impact us, markets, you can always play the markets, but you can't play the interest rates. And this has been a pretty tough, what you and I chatted last. I said, hey, if you folks in agriculture can weather these interest rates, you can weather anything. And so to the extent that we can soften these interest rates without getting inflation rolling off again is key. And Scott's announcement was welcomed by the business community. I know some folks say, well, that's an insider. Come on, folks. We don't want to have disruption in the business community. We know our cattle market does well. When the stock market, when there's that confidence in our markets, we're seeing those markets. We need those markets to operate with real-time indicators of where we should be at. We don't want to see these panics. We don't want to see these big price discrepancies. I think sometimes we often forget what was happening in COVID. Say what you will. Package plant fires, COVID, you'd see these rundowns in the cattle market. That's what decimates us. So strong fiscal thoughtfulness when it comes to our policy, our monetary policy. Look, I'm not elected by anyone in the sense that I'm not going to be working on your tariff policies, but someone needs to say, hey, if we slam China or slam some country with another round of tariffs, what will that do to our domestic monetary policy? Because at the end of the day, folks, I don't care where you're at, unless you've made it all and then some, lending is a big issue. And you need to have someone that has an understanding for that and we'll be mindful of that in this administration. I think Scott's going to be a good candidate for that. Percent.
You talked real briefly about Department of Commerce, and Howard Lutnick has been nominated over there. Just real quick thoughts in that element and that tie into agriculture.
He's going to be interesting because it sounds to me, and again, I use this. I don't know if I understand that Trump, just like when my Democrat friends get elected, they kind of have their mantras of what they say. So America first, yes, that's their mantra, but I always kind of want to pare it back a little bit. Well, what does that mean? And Lutnick, I think he's gonna approach that commerce role with kind of a bold vision. Right. We will balance and a lot of times commerce is dealing with trade issues, kind of bad players on the trade side, but also just how is our flow of commerce and goods globally. I think he's going to take it again, another self-made, successful individual, a billionaire. A lot of these guys are pretty well off, but he's going to approach it with very much kind of a fearless, like both him and Scott. If you've already been, a lot of folks, they kind of work their way up through government and then they do pretty well. They get this cabinet pick and they're like, well, I'm going to go off and be a consultant or advisor and make a lot of money on the back end. These individuals have already made their money, right? So they're going to do this as kind of duty, country, their belief system. And really, again, you could say America first. I like to say they're a little bit more fearless in how they make their decisions. They're not waiting for their next cushy exit government job. They're doing this because they fundamentally believe in it. And I think that has good things and bad things, right? Yeah. If you're on the wrong side of their vision, you might be in a tough spot. But I think they're going to be fearless. And oftentimes you have someone at the top in government to say, this is what I think is best for American people. I don't care what my next consulting gig is. I think that's a good recipe for success.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on that. And one that I think all of us in agriculture are seeing, that these folks that are being nominated definitely are self-made, wealthy folks. Speaking of
None of them came out of the cattle business. They didn't get wealthy out of the cattle business. What are we saying here, Justin? What's going on?
I know.
They're not having the fun we're having in life.
Yeah. Yeah, the office of No Land and Cattle. Who's going to be running that one? All of us?
We're stewards of the land, and it feels the best. But yes, you bet.
All right, let's just kind of keep rolling through those and self-made folks that are in there, and let's just go to Department of Interior. I think that's big, definitely in the West. I think folks are really concerned, was wondering where that's going to be. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, of course, in that, and I think for a lot of us in the West, you always want a Western person in that department that understands what government land is and the impact and the power it has in the West. So your thoughts on North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum as Secretary of Interior?
Doug Burgum just comes across as that happy warrior. Again, you talk about self-made, you referenced, he got some funding. There's this, first bank in North Dakota. He was funded. I think at the time, John Hogan was over there working hard and he got this tech startup up and running. Again, made a few more dollars than I'll probably ever make in cattle, but good on him. I like that. Success, prosperity, North Dakota-based entity, went on very, very popular, very effective governor, multi-use, agriculture, minerals, natural resources, believes in all the above, energy approach, but then kind of a happy warrior, got involved, former chair of Western Governors Association. Again, to your point, understands that. And I like the apparatus of Western governors. Got some good friends and colleagues over there. They do a really good job of getting the senators not to just think about their state. And so being able to be in that role as Western governors, knowing, yes, Idaho's similar, but it's different from a North Dakota perspective and things of that nature. So he brings all of that to the table as a former chair of Western Governors. I think he's going to do a tremendous job. I think he'll be very mindful of the intricacies of both private working lands, public lands, how that mixes, energy development, and all of that coming together. A lot of this is interspersed, and he knows that better than anyone. Not a huge public land state, but again, that knowledge of Western governors and that knowledge of what it takes to be successful in the natural resource and agriculture environment. What a great selection for Department of Interior.
Yeah. Real quick, in regards to him and with the policy change, or I should say the administration change, do you think we're really going to get far on, is there going to be some reversal on some of the resource management plans that have started down the road?
I think they'll put a pause on it. And again, I'll probably sound like the unpopular one at the holidays. I usually am, because I made the decision early on to advocate on behalf of ranchers and natural resource managers. So you just by default, because you walk in those circles, people already give you the slanted eye, and they should. But there were some really well-intended efforts. I understand there's There's a lot of flack against the BLM conservation planning rule, but there was also that goal to get some expanded multi-use, get some of those dollars in there, if you could have some various programs, land management programs, if there was a funder that was interested in saying, hey, I'm going to improve conservation and I'll help fund that. So it was a very noble effort, initiative. Did it go too far? I'm not going to argue that. Those are the folks that are living it and on the land. They're going to find out if this was kind of an overreach, if you will. And if there is that case, I have no doubt that the Department of Interior will modify that. Do I think they'll throw it out entirely? I hope they don't, because our goal was to utilize these public lands, quite frankly, for the ranchers and the folks that are leasing on them, to have multi-use opportunities. But there are pending lawsuits out there. They're going to have to make some tough decisions. And I think they're stepping up to it. And again, like everything, what I always encourage folks is I don't like the adage, don't throw the baby out the bathwater. But don't throw everything out of the previous administration. Look to see what was there and can you build off it? I've always worked to build bridges. I'm the only one that can say, was working on stuff with Barack Obama and rolled right in there and started working with Donald J. Trump in the first administration. Recreated a bridge in agriculture on several key issues. And again, we're going to be having stuff that we worked on with Biden go right into the Trump administration. So to the extent of finding the good in these proposals out there, but yes, if there's something that's problematic, modify it, move forward.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to another pick. And this is one that, as of our conversation here today, is relatively new. And that was the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, out of Texas. And that was something, wasn't really quite sure where the pick was going to be coming from. And then kind of last minute deal. Your thoughts on her?
Absolutely. I'm excited because, again, he chose someone that had already done pretty well, right? Went got her law degree, Texas Ag, Texas rural background, worked for the kind of think tank, if you will, the America First Policy Institute. And of course, you see some pretty familiar names when you start checking around there, who their list of board members are. Of course, Linda McMahon, she's going in now as Department of Education, Larry Kudlow. So all of those those very influential individuals, both from the first Trump administration. And that's a lot of times that happens, right? You'll see as new presidents roll in these think tanks. My friends on the other side of the aisle have done a really good job. Sometimes I don't always agree with those think tanks. And so it's kind of a place for these folks to go and remain influential. But the interesting thing about Brooke Rollins is she had a very, very active background, and both from the legal side, state Senate side, kind of a non-traditional background. And I enjoy that because she'll have that approach of, again, kind of being fearless. She's already, she was picked at a young age. She didn't have a lot of the typical pedigree where all the ag groups say, this is our person, this is our person. And I like that. I think that's a breath of fresh air because it's really going to be her mark. She doesn't know anyone at any chance, right? Mm-hmm. Other than the president, which you share with the pleasure of the president once we mention you get through the Senate confirmation process. So President Trump obviously saw something in her, some strong candidates. There was a lot of candidates that a lot of ag groups were teeing up, and she won out. So the president saw something. He knows what rural America is after. And so we trust his judgment and teeing that up, and we look forward to working with her.
Yeah. So let's go as we kind of wrap up this particular segment here and a final pick. And it is one that I've heard some concern for those in agriculture about this one. And that is the Department of Health and Human Services. And that pick being, of course, Robert F. Kennedy, RFK. And the ag industry has some concerns there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's a lot of concern. Of course, the U.S. Cattlemen's membership, there's a concern about the MNRA vaccine using livestock. So there is this alignment, if you will, with RFK Jr. And honestly, just the over-processed foods. I think we can all agree. We putting something that we're feeding our kids or feeding ourselves that has a shelf life of longer than our lifetime probably isn't something that we want to be consuming. So we kind of all align with fundamentally, hey, some fresh meat, throw in some lettuce when you can, and potatoes. There's something about basic food groups that aren't a bad thing, and you probably don't need a pill for everything. And so I think conceptually, there's a lot of alignment with RFK Jr. But as he looks at this, let's get beyond pesticides and even just mindfulness around vaccines. I've spent a lot of time working with my friends on the other side of the aisle, letting us utilize antibiotics, letting us use vaccines. I mean, we're the envy of the world with our health and safety when it comes to our livestock population. Think about the massive numbers of cattle as we're going through this fall calf run, the mixture of calves at sale barns are going in the feed yard. Same goes for swine, poultry, and we're able to keep our food supply healthy. We're able to weather that because of our use of antibiotics and vaccines. And so just having that awareness, and then of course too, look at the amazing food production, look at the amazing conservation practices we have because of targeted applications of specialized, highly specialized, environmentally friendly chemicals. And I think it's an information education process. And I have confidence in that confirmation hearing against some of Grassley mentioned. So that RFK Jr. will go through. So they'll definitely be, I'm sure CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News will have some fantastic opportunity to sell lots of advertising in real time, play-by-play of RFK. Mm-hmm. While those hearings are taking place and all that drama is taking place, I trust our senators to do a good job of explaining the agriculture priorities. In the meantime, we're going to be rolling up our sleeves, working some very, very key priorities as it relates to our priority issues as we kick off 2025.
Yeah. Well, Jess, let's take another break here. And as you said, those key priorities and key things to kick off 2025, I want to talk about that in our next segment. So we'll get into that, folks. Stay with us. This is the Working Ranch Radio Show. And this segment today brought to you by Safety Zone Calf Catcher. And here's the captain, Tim O'Byrne, with more.
Hey everybody, Tim here. We're fixing to come up on 1 million downloads of our Working Ranch Radio Show podcast, which is really exciting. And it got me to thinking about another viral moment that we had back in 2017 when we ran a short Facebook video of the Safety Zone Calf Catchers. And it was so popular, it got 6.8 million views in the first 5 days. I want you folks to check it out, Safety Zone Calf Catchers. It's a great product for all producers. Keep you safe when you're working with baby calves, especially for old timers like me who maybe can't outrun those cows anymore. Check them out, Safety Zone Calf Catchers.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone Calf Catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone Calf Catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Jess Peterson with Western Skies Strategy, also Senior Policy Advisor for the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. And Jess, as we move now into our conversation and looking at, well, what is the work ahead of us? You had closed out the last segment talking about let's get focused on 2025 and the next several years and some of those, some of the things that we need to continue working on. And as we do that, and as I said at break there, I think we can get into addressing topics that I think other people might be thinking about, things like, inflation, interest rates, tariffs, all those kinds of things that will come into this. So I guess to start off with, let's talk about a subject that you've been working on for many, many years, and that is the rule on price discovery, mandatory price reporting, and where you see that moving forward.
Absolutely. And just for everyone to stay out to think about this, you literally went through a global pandemic. We have global insecurity as far as it leads to global conflicts, raised surging high just cost of production, inflation, and just supply chain, and your interest rates. So any of you that are listening right now, my gosh, hats off to you. As you come to the table at Thanksgiving, you have a lot to be thankful for, but I'm thankful for each and every farmer and rancher that's weathered the storm and the inspiration. This is what allows you to sit around the kitchen table and the campfires and say, remember those years? We did it, and we saw through the other side. The commodity guys are struggling a little bit right now. The cattle guys are going, okay, so is this going to last? Is it going to keep going? You know what? You did it. So be emboldened by that. What are we going to do as we look every rancher and cattle feeder and anyone involved in the cattle business in the eye across the country? We're going to keep to our rule book, our playbook. Our playbook is, look, the market operates best with active and informed participants at all levels, right? Whether you're selling those calves, you want boots in the seats bidding on your cattle, and then you want bids on those cattle when they're fat cattle on up the line, and you want boots in the grocery stores buying that beef, right? That's what we want. We want an active and informed market. And so we have worked through the beginning since I first started in this in over 20 years ago, the summer of 2024, this obscure concept of mandatory price reporting. And when you say it, people's eyes glaze over. It is the number one component that makes or breaks the cattle market, both then, now, and into the future. And if you don't learn about mandatory price reporting, if you don't understand that concept, it's going to be a really tough way for you to ever be active and informed in this cattle industry. Learn, follow the price reporting, get on our U.S. Cattlemen's Foreign Rat calls. And I think we should probably just have a segment alone every quarter. We're going to talk about price reporting because, like the Farm Bill, it's reauthorized every 5 years. And like the Farm Bill, it has key reauthorized programs. So we saw a few years back, we said, hey, there needs to be some modifications here because the lack of price discovery and the fact that we could link the reauthorization to modifications. We looked at the thinly traded cash. We knew there were some concerns in the Obama administration, and then in the Trump administration, there was a study that needed to be done about the thinly traded cash as it linked to price reporting and reauthorization. The Trump administration, the USDA at that time, gathered all that up. There was some kickback. No surprise. You should know the packers and the corporate cattle feeders pushed back, didn't want this data to get public. It did, and it spotlighted all the problems. And then, shocker, amazing, the Biden administration looked at this report and helped build their proposed rule that's on comment period right now. They just extended that comment period, but this is a rulemaking that would allow USDA to address price discovery and fairness in fed cattle markets. There's a whole list of pieces they're trying to do. You can just go on USDA. You can find it. We'll have it linked here in this interview. And all of that information is out there. Now, here's the kicker. We're going to see if Secretary Rollins is going to move on this. And so you see the entire countryside said, we want price discovery. We have this bipartisan, this initiative started under the first Trump administration, now is going to be sitting on the desk for the incoming named Secretary Brooke Rollins and say, what am I going to do with this? That's just one key issue. But if we get this issue right, it means the stability. It means the bullness that we have noticed in this cattle market should and can remain as we see true price discovery go forward.
Who's going to be pushing against this?
If you're getting a sweet deal right now, if you're a corporate cattle feeder that loves to say, I don't really have to worry. I'm going to bleed these guys. I'm going to play that futures market. I'm going to short that futures market and get my sweet deal. And my sweet packer buddy's going to take care of me. You're not going to be very happy right now. And you know what, buddy? I hope you're listening because we're coming for you. We're coming for any of these folks that have these sweet deals that are breaking the backs of any cow-calf, yearling operator, or most importantly, our independent cattle feeder that does everything they can. They get those bids. They operate. They share their numbers. Which immediately, I just sold a pen of cattle at this number. And all of a sudden that's reported. And then there's that packer buddy up the road that gets a sweet deal and they don't report it. And then they're shorting the market and they're messing it up because they're messing up the futures market and they're messing up the character and credibility of our cattle market. Those are the folks who are coming for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to another topic. It's already one that has, it's been a topic since 1998. I think I interviewed Leo McDonald a while back, and I asked him when did it start, where we started talking about country of origin labeling, and he kind of talked about those early meetings. And of course, you probably even remember some of that as well. Jess being probably a part of some of that early conversation that was taking place. It's moved forward, and where we're at today with that, we have a country of origin labeling. It's something, as we know, that if you're going to put U.S. on that, it has to fall under these requirements. And that's really kind of what it is. Your thoughts on where that could be going? Is there going to be any changes? Is what we got going to be workable in the industry? Your thoughts?
Well, it's bittersweet when we talk about country of origin labeling, because there was this Carbon County, Montana kid that gave a persuasive speech at Gonzaga University in the spring of 2024 about the need for country of origin labeling. And at that time, I said, I'm going to go back to Washington, get it fixed, and go back to the ranch. Well, that was 2004. Didn't quite get it fixed. Yes. So where we're at now is under this previous Biden USDA with Vilsack, they proposed to close the loophole that allowed currently on the shelves, you'll see it says products of the U.S. that isn't quite product. So they're voluntarily labeling it, but there's a loophole that allows them to do that. We're going to try to close that loophole. The Biden administration teed it up. Again, President-elect Trump, along with incoming Secretary Rollins, we hope they're on track. It takes a while for food service to comply. We almost lost our minds when they announced it earlier this year, and they said it won't be coming into play until January 1st of 2026. But that, again, that gives retailers, they can start complying tomorrow if they wanted, but the oversight of saying, hey, if you're going to label it and you're out of violation, you're going to get dinged. You're going to be subject to fines and penalties. So she'll have a year. The Trump administration will have a year, and Secretary named Brooke Rollins will have a year to work on that, to get that ready to close that loophole. And then we'll have to go back to Congress to see if we actually have to put a mandatory country labeling law in place.
Jess, do you think it's workable that right now, I think the issue is whether if you're going to put a USA label on there, it needs to fit these requirements. I think everybody really has some agreement on that. But what about the ones that say, well, we want everything labeled of country? Is that a workable option? Do you think that can be done? And if not, or if why, I mean, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, because you have some of these good region programs. You have some good Northwestern labeled products. And so it is kind of tough, right? You get some Canadian feeder cattle are coming here to finish out that load. They're adding value to our Northwestern cattle. So there is a debate in that regard. But I think as long as you close the loopholes and first make sure you don't have a direct breakdown of the rules, right? They're intentionally violating the integrity of truth and labeling. So you get that clarified, and then you work on the others. Obviously, the idea of having Brazilian beef on the shelves or anything from some of these markets from a long way away that have animal health concerns, that's a problem. How we deal with the Mexican and Canadian influence, that's where we're going to have to circle back up at the table. Yes, there still should be a pathway forward for U.S. born and raised product on the shelves. We're working to make sure that you can't take advantage of it. How you have this commingled and how that gets worked out, that remains to be seen. And it's been a while since we had this country origin labeling discussion. So I think more needs to happen on this discussion to figure out how we fit these branded programs and make it all work together. And there is a pathway. We can make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, let's take another break here, Jess. And when we come back, we still have some topics to get into. I want to talk about the animal ID mandate, also trade, and also Farm Bill, which is going to be coming up as well. Discussion and debate on that and what that's going to entail as we look ahead and how it conjoins with some of the different cabinet picks that have been out there as well. So we still have a lot to talk about when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest, Jess Peterson, joining us here today as we are collaborating, or actually I'm kind of getting his take on everything. Okay, let's finish this segment here in our conversation here today, looking at a couple more elements of things in our industry that will affect the agricultural industry. I want to touch real quick on trade and animal diseases. We might also have you in that and if it correlates with the conversation, talk a little bit on tariffs. But that's a big issue, trade and animal diseases. They're kind of, maybe they're two separate topics, but in the same way, they still kind of come together a little bit.
Absolutely. We are seeing, oddly enough, even after all the tariffs, and I just heard Down House from status with U.S. Beef Export Federation, we had kind of gotten a little bit of a tariff spat, trade war with China, but our beef exports have picked up to China. And so we're showing that you can, and this was always something you mentioned, Mayor McDonald. Will McDonald always said, look, you can fight for fair trade, utilize tariffs as a tool. And then just like, I'm fighting the crud, we're all kind of fighting the crud. I go to the doc, I get an antibiotic. You use it for a short time, you kick it and you move on. So I think that being mindful of tariffs to put pressure to create fair trade, I think as long as we keep that mantra in place and not just become a dumping ground for products in countries that have foot and mouth disease, that have these animal health problems and concerns. So just making sure that we don't get surging imports from countries that don't have our labor practices, that don't uphold the animal health safety standards. They're not undercutting domestic producers. To ensuring the health and safety of our cattle herd, and again, utilizing that either through shutting you down because of health concerns or if it's a surging market utilizing tariffs. So all in right now, I see we have a good pathway forward on this, and we'll work accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about the next subject, and that is animal ID mandate. Definitely something that has been a very, very hot button topic the last year. Rules coming out that is putting some things into place here. As I said, mixed opinions in the industry, our own beef industry as a whole. And what do you see with that as it moves forward?
Okay, and talking about an issue, that was my second key item was animal ID. And again, if these things keep, I hope my two daughters, they're kind of asking me, Dad, what is it that you do? They're trying to figure that story out. I don't know if I want them to get into agriculture policy to have these long-lasting initiatives and policies. And animal ID has certainly been one, but I have a lot of pride. Again, if you had told me 20 years ago that we'd have maintained the integrity and use of the brand, I'd have told you, boy, that's going to be a tough haul. And we did. I'm very proud of the work we've been able to do for existing systems that are in place. The brand, we used the banks tag as a frame for ID. They didn't like it, but we kept it in place. Why? It was cheap. It was effective. We're used to using it. The back tag that we use at sale barns, so all these. And that's why I always want to be clear when somebody starts saying, are you guys for animal ID? Absolutely not. There is no bigger proponent of animal identification than livestock producers, than ranchers, right? We have so many forms of animal ID. What we're opposed to is the government saying, oh, here's the way you're going to track your cattle. Here's what you're going to do. It's how the government goes about doing that. There's nobody better at animal disease traceability than ranchers, their state vets, and their local veterinarians. They do an incredible job. Sale barns, feed yards, everybody in the like. So where we're at right now, they're moving forward with electronifying, putting these electronic EIDs in place of the metal banks tags for the sexually intact breeding cattle. And the problem is that we're hearing, I go back more, but we're hearing there's a tag shortage, but we're also really struggling with the fact that it's changing the dynamic of commerce. It's changing the dynamic of how we're moving these cattle. It's becoming an animal health welfare concern because it's slowing things down. It is unconscionable that we're still using a low frequency tag. Again, 20 years ago, we're talking about technology. I can't even imagine the technology, what my phone looked like 20 years ago versus right now. And we're still looking at this very antiquated technology. So technology has not evolved. And that's very disappointing. So they're trying to force antiquated technology with these low frequencies. And we utilize voluntarily. Our operation is utilizing these programmed cattle. We're utilizing these. So I'm not saying it without some level of credibility in using them. I can tell you the low frequency is a struggle, lack of tags, and the lack of infrastructure around readers and where they go with that too. We're also being told where they're putting this data. So there's a lot of big question marks and unknowns. So as this secretary comes in, Brooke Rollins, she's going to have to take a really serious look at over the top. And I'll say some of, again, well-intended, yes, evolve the metal tags to electronic EID tag, but this thing is way too fast, way too far, way too soon with a lack of good provisions. Take another look at this proposed animal ID rule. Probably be good to put that thing in the back 40 for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking about that, one of the issues that comes up is about information and data. That's always a big concern. That has been one of the biggest things about an animal ID mandate was the storage of that. Just a far out question here. Blockchain affecting that. Anything element or agriculture. Your thoughts? Are you privy to any of that kind of information?
Yeah, we had a great session on it 2 years ago with blockchain. I think blockchain is amazing and it's a great market-driven concept. We're part of the Global Animal Partnership. I use both Samson and GAP provisions. So it's consumer driven. I work with my third party verifier. They have all my tags. Then I send them off to the feeder. They have all my stuff. But that's all voluntary. That's market driven. Blockchain, absolutely. Go forth and prosper. That's market driven. But when you talk about the basic animal health components, and my friends out there, the other associations that are trying to privatize this data, colleagues, we fought you on this in 2008 and 2009, and we won, and we're going to do it again. No private industry group should privatize animal ID information, and it should not be mandated by the government. They pulled that stunt back in 2007, 8, and 9, and they're trying to do it again. We're not going to go down that path. So yes, there's private-driven blockchain, program, value added, all of that. Those are great options, and we're continue to see that increase. But if this is simple animal health, disease traceability, keep it simple. Work with your state veterinarians. keep that database and have the Feds fund the state animal health database that has a bookend piece where we know a little bit about those animals, or that we can have a bookend at the packing plant back to the ranch in case we need to find anything. That was the concept. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah. Okay. Jess, we have about a minute and a half here, and I want to hit the last topic, and that is the Farm Bill. Of course, in May of 24, this last year, there was a Farm Bill introduced. How was that going to move forward in light of the control in the U.S. House and the Senate, and of course in the President in the White House with being under Republican control?
I think they're going to move this thing forward. I really think so. You have a pretty strong majority in the Senate, and you have a very influential and effective senator and chairwoman Debbie Stabenow. Kind of a different set of priorities. I mean, look, she was very, very good for us in livestock. Did a tremendous job. Her support in the urban areas meant that a lot of these programs and kind of climate smart angles, they would be button heads, right? I do think I urge my friends on the Republican side of the aisle to be very mindful of not undercutting our urban college and supporters, again, to your point. So this idea that we're going to ding any of our less fortunate folks that utilize those food stamp programs, I hope we don't go down that path. But I do see this Farm Bill. I made a prediction last fall. I said you won't see it till the spring of 2025. I think this thing's going to move. I think Senator Bozeman's going to get this thing moving quite along, and look to see this thing get wrapped up here by spring and summer of 2025.
All right. Well, Jess, there's still some more things we could talk about, even about the Farm Bill stuff. I appreciate your take on this. Just some final comments from you as we look ahead in these next upcoming years.
Just so much optimism, and I want to say this, and you've said it really well. I think it's time to get back to what we love in the countryside. We love communities. We love helping our neighbors. You don't look to see where they voted or where their politics lie or any of that nature. You just help them out. And I think that's what we love about our rural areas. And frankly, I think my friends in the urban areas forgot we still help each other out here in this part of the country. And I think having a better understanding. So I would hope, and I know this sounds probably a little bit like I might be nipping at some doctored up eggnog here, but I hope that we take the time in the next 4 years to reach out, kind of learn, and use this as I don't say a teaching moment, but as a learning moment. Look, it's a lot to build and work in the farming and ranching community and really connect with our urban folks and say, hey, what are your concerns? What do you like to see done? Here's what we're doing every day. It's not easy. It's not always glorious. It's not always ready for a miniseries TV episode. It's a little bit more than that. So I think reaching across, being optimistic, take this time. If we do get some changes, let's not beat our chest and say, wow, we told you soon. You get back where you came from. Every time you make a comment about this industry, you're talking to your consumer. So and we are good stewards, and just say, hey, appreciate what you're trying to do, but we're going to make a few modifications here. We're still going to be great stewards of the land. We are good stewards of the land. We're going to give you the best unwholesome product. So I think my call to everyone right now, I don't want to say it's unity, but it's just spreading that good neighbor vibe across the country that makes America, rural America, both sides of it. Sometimes we wish we could only live in our rural county out in the sticks is what we enjoy so much, but we wouldn't get very far with our product if we only took care of everyone in the county. There's a big, large world out there, and the more we can embrace and interact with them and create some shared values is a good thing.
You bet. Well, Jess, I thank you for joining us here on the program, and as always appreciate your take on it, your insight on all of this as well, and wishing you the best as we move forward into this coming year.
Hey, all the best to you, Justin, everyone out there in the Working Ranch Radio Show country. We appreciate you. Enjoy, be well, keep informed. And if you got any questions, hit us up at U.S. Cattlemen's, and also get involved with all your local farm and ag organizations. I kind of prioritize U.S. Cattlemen's, but don't kid yourself. I show up at a lot of them on my own with my own county and state memberships in addition to that because it matters. Justin, thanks y'all much. See you one down the road.
You bet. And again, Jess Peterson joining us here today on the program with Western Skies Strategy, also a senior policy advisor to the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. Be sure to go to the show notes, and we will provide those links that Jess referenced as well. Now, speaking of U.S. Cattlemen's Association, I know it's kind of short notice for those of you that maybe live a long ways away, but if you are close, they are having their annual meeting this week in San Antonio. You can go to their website at uscattlemen.org and find more information on that. Stay with us. Coming up after the break, the captain will be in with this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents, and we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. Hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. We sure did here in southern Nevada. It's a beautiful sunny day. One thing we noticed when Christina and I went shopping prior to Thanksgiving, we went into our grocery store. Of course, the first thing we do when we grab a cart is thank God that we're living in a country where this beautiful bounty can be purchased right down the street from where we live. And that's just such a blessing. And but we walked into the store this time, and right away, the first thing you see is 2 meat cases that usually has some items on sale in there. But this time, and this is about a week before Thanksgiving, it was totally packed with beef. And I mean, beautiful cuts. And we picked up a nice, at least a 3-pound bone-in ribeye roast with lots of nice marbling and fat on it. And I did a Dutch oven with that later on that day. And I just got to thinking, they pushed the beef out front and people were looking it over and buying. And I thought, is there a trend going on here? So I did a little bit of research, and CoBank Knowledge Exchange released a report here earlier this fall that said that turkey consumption last holiday season reached a 43-year all-time low, and beef and pork were kind of picking up the slack. So you can see that a trend is happening there over Thanksgiving. A few reasons, it's just, I think probably the main one is the turkeys are a big ticket item to prepare and make sure you get it done right and everything, whereas beef is pretty much hassle-free. It's a really great product. And of course, coming from great ranchers like you folks, the consumer knows it's safe and wholesome and nutritious, and we got to thank you for that. So lots to be thankful for. Justin, back to you in the booth.
All right, thanks, Captain. And I myself enjoyed prime rib while we were at Thanksgiving. We were able to visit my son down at Fort Huachuca in Arizona on the base there and had lunch there in the DFAC, and that was one of the options. Of course, that's what I chose, and it was very good, I might say. Well, as we turn towards our weather, joining us is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, as you and I were talking before we went on air here, the fact that we are going to see a little bit of a reprieve from the weather that we've seen in the west, and most of that is going to be moving east as we start out this month.
Yeah, we had that really big Pacific storm just really batter Washington and Oregon and parts of Northern California with a lot of wind and a lot of stormy weather. And then the remains of that storm spread quite a bit of snow into the central Rockies and in parts of the Great Basin states. That system moved into the nation's midsection and then really changed things. It brought in a lot of very cold Canadian air. And what will happen is that there's going to be an extended period where that Pacific Northwest and West Coast that was so stormy, well, they're going to flip. They're going to go under a large area of high pressure for about a week or so, while for about a week or so, very cold, unsettled weather will be found in the nation's midsection, the Great Lakes in the Northeast, where lake effect snows and the coldest air of the season will overspread a lot of the nation in the central and east that really experienced a very warm fall. So they're kind of getting their comeuppance.
So with that winter weather moving more east and the west and more under a high pressure zone, will there be cold temperatures with that?
Well, it'll moderate a bit, especially west of the divide. East of the Continental Divide, some of that cold air from Canada will spill out east of the Front Range of the mountains and will affect some areas there. So you kind of have to use the Continental Divide as your boundary. Along and west of the divide, temperatures are going to moderate. A little bit further out in the plains of the west, it'll be colder.
All right, Don. Well, appreciate the update, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
See you then.
You bet. And if you want to tune in each and every morning to Don Day's weather forecast, you can go to his website at dayweather.com and find a link to his YouTube channel. Be sure to join us next week on the program. We're going to be talking end-of-year topics, especially for those of you with LLC. So be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks again for joining us. I'm your host, Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your head down and your mind in the middle. So long.